Do you feel that Vladimir Putin has no choice but to try to go out, try to find this way out of the war against Ukraine by agreeing with Trump's proposal on Ukraine? Do you feel that if Vladimir Putin declines Trump's proposal on Ukraine, then he can lose his grip on power?
I think things are moving in that direction, certainly. It is very clear that that Putin now realizes he's in a predicament. He's in a difficult position. And he seems to be now looking more at his own personal survival than perhaps, what is happening in Ukraine to his army. And he knows that, if he is defeated in Ukraine, then that's the end of him. We know what happens in Russia with failed dictators. They very quickly get taken out and removed. And I think Putin is now really looking to see how he can survive himself. And, one is getting the feeling that he realizes that, the cards are all in President Trump's hands. President Trump could lead to the complete demise of Putin or could give him a way out. But Putin knows that his only way out is some sort of orderly withdrawal from Ukraine, rather than complete defeat. If the Russian army is completely defeated in Ukraine, Putin is finished. And that is in the gift of President Trump, I expect. So, yeah, I think Trump does hold the key here. And, for President Trump, not that I know him personally, I only sort of read about him and listen to him. He seems to be the sort of person who revels on success and tries to avoid failure as at all possible. If he can create a ceasefire in Ukraine early this year, at the very beginning of his premiership, I'm sure we'll hear him shouting about it all around the world. For him, that will be his greatest success. So, at the moment, the tide, everything is moving in Ukraine's direction, I think, and against Russia. And let's hope that Trump is as good as his word when he becomes president at the end of this month.
It seems also that Vladimir Putin has faced numerous setbacks during the latest months. High casualties rate in Ukraine, as a failure to achieve strategic objectives in the war against Ukraine, the withdrawal from Syria, and also they even have managed to shoot down Azerbaijani Airlines, a civilian plane. Moreover, Russian General Kirillov has been eliminated. What is your assessment of the every setback Russia has faced during the year of 2024?
Well, I think you've captured it very well there, what has happened in the last few months. Setback after setback, and failure becomes a habit. And Putin seems to be failing, virtually everywhere we turn. As you say, even last week, the Russians seem to have shot down a civilian airliner, killing, a lot of people. That in itself would be horrific, and, would certainly in the Western world would cause, the president or prime minister of that country to have to resign. But when you put it on the back of everything else that's going on, the huge casualty rate, the fact that Russia can only fill up its army these days with North Korean mercenaries, that no doubt is costing Putin an awful lot. So it's an expression that we use, death by 1,000 cuts. And Putin might not have 1,000 cuts, but he's got several hundred. And these are really hurting him and really hurting Russia. And the momentum is so important in warfare and in these sort of geostrategic politics. The momentum is really turning against him, which is why I think we're hearing his conciliatory tones, suggesting that there is a way out rather than just continue to fight. But he also realizes that way out is to allow his own survival is going to be the Russian army out of Ukraine. I can't see, anything less than that. So, things are going badly for Russia. Once things start going badly, it's very difficult to turn them around. And at the moment, one can't see a prospect of that. And maybe Putin is wishing for President Trump to come into power as quickly as possible so that he can stop the war and potentially save his own skin.
Also, let's cover another Russia's setback, the Kursk Oblast, the Kursk region. Russia and Ukraine has successfully destroyed Russia's 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, according to Forbes. Moreover, today, Ukraine, right now, several minutes before our conversation or several hours before our meeting today, Ukraine has successfully struck the command post of this brigade in the Kursk region. We have seen new footage from the armed forces of Ukraine. How can you assess current situation in the Kursk region and unsustainable losses of Russian army? Because according to Forbes, the Russian brigade, 810th Brigade, has been redeployed out of the battle because of the high rate of casualties there.
I think it's a really important and significant development. We discussed before Christmas that Kursk would really hold the key to what happens in future. You know, Kursk is such an important piece of Russia to Russian people. You know, it's where the Great Battle of Kursk was fought in the summer of 1943, which eventually started the demise of the Nazis. But, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands of Russians were killed there. Now, to lose that territory last year to the, amazingly effective Ukraine military incursion was a devastating blow. And I think, you know, part of the reason that Putin is now backtracking and looking for a way out is that he was gambling on retaking Kursk. He said it. He said he'd retake Kursk by Christmas. And it's clear he obviously hasn't done that. And as we've seen in the last few days, you know, his main brigade there has been absolutely decimated by Ukrainian forces. And, I can quite see if the brigade has been redeployed, it's going to leave a vacuum, and, you know, potentially Ukraine military could take more of Kursk. So his failure to retake it is yet another, I think, severe cut to Putin's position and power. And if he can't retake Kursk by the time President Trump comes into power, again, he is going to be severely on the back foot. And, I think we're all delighted that the armed forces of Ukraine have realized quite how important Kursk is and have significantly sort of reinforced that area and had a lot of military success in the last few days and weeks. So as we discussed many times, Kursk is the key here. And at the moment, the Ukraine military is very much on the front foot in Kursk. And there is no sign that that's likely to change anytime soon.
North Korean army has suffered more than 3,000 casualties in the Kursk region. We have also seen some interesting videos with poor actions and poor performance of the North Korean soldiers there. How can you assess the effectiveness of the North Korean deployment and their military operation in the Kursk region, as we now have seen the main results of their operations there and high number of casualties?
Well, I think the North Korean performance and the North Korean involvement says an awful lot about Russia at the moment. First of all, I think it's virtually criminal that these soldiers who don't speak Russian, and I expect very few Russians speak North Korean, you know, they've been thrown into, you know, an area that they don't know, commanded by people who speak a language they don't speak, in a climate that they, you know, entirely unsuited to, you know, the devastating cold winter, you know, of the east of Ukraine, and Kursk is completely alien to them. And the casualty rates, as we've seen, you know, it's even higher than what the Russians are leaving. I mean, these people really are being marched to their death by their Russian masters. It is a crime. They are, in effect, mercenaries, but no doubt these poor soldiers, you know, are not being paid the sort of bounties that you would expect mercenaries to be paid. So, Yeah, I think it's almost a crime against humanity to put these poor North Koreans. But what it shows even more is how desperate Putin is for soldiers. He can't generate any more Russians to go and fight, so he's having to buy, in effect, soldiers from North Korea. It says an awful lot about the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un as well. So yeah, I think this, again, if one look at the positive from Ukraine's perspective, shows that the sort of Russian edifice is crumbling. And that's why the West and the US must keep the pressure on Russia, keep supporting Ukraine to make sure that Ukraine gets a peace that it really deserves, which now seems almost at touching distance.
David Tafuri is a former US Department of State official and former UN official. Welcome to our program, Mr. Tafuri.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here in studio with you.
I would like to begin with your expectations for the year of 2025. There are lots of developments. Ukraine continues to fight back despite all the odds. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has suffered numerous setbacks in the recent months: withdrawal from Syria, also high casualties rate, failure to also liberate the Kursk region, and also the Russian economy is in a free fall right now. At the same time, Donald Trump has been elected as the next US president. What is your expectations regarding the war in Ukraine for this year of 2025?
Well, you're right. There are some good signs and setbacks for Putin and for Russia. The biggest thing that's going to happen this month in the United States is that President Trump will be inaugurated for a second term as president on January 20th. And he has talked about what he wants to do with respect to the war in Ukraine. And he said he wants it to end as soon as possible, and he wants to try to broker a deal. So I think we have to take him at his face that he is going to attempt to negotiate a resolution between Zelensky and Putin. But I also think it's going to be very difficult to get past the obstacles. And notably, Zelensky and Putin are very far apart in what they're willing to do, at least what they've said they're willing to do, to have a deal. So look for Trump to try to make that deal. If he doesn't get it quickly, then he's going to have to make some decisions about the U.S. approach to Ukraine. One of those questions is he going to continue the weapons and military aid to Ukraine? That's obviously crucial to the people here in Ukraine, and most importantly, crucial to the soldiers that are fighting on the front line on behalf of Ukraine, but really on behalf of the West against the aggression by Russia. President Trump will also have to decide very early on if he is going to continue the sanctions. And I would say that the sanctions, if we really want them to work, we have to not only keep the ones that we have in place, we have to add to them. Because while you said that Russia's economy is hurting, it's not hurting enough to slow down and stop the Russian war machine. Russia still has sufficient revenues, especially from its sale of oil, to manufacture more drones, more military equipment, and more weapons that are killing Ukrainians every day, as you know.
I would like also to pay your attention to the first question you just mentioned about security assistance. Would it be a real thing for Donald Trump to negotiate a ceasefire if he stops sending military aid for Ukraine?
Well, I think the premise of your question is a good one, which is that how can you negotiate a deal with Putin if you take the pressure off of him first? And hopefully President Trump and his senior advisors that are going to be coming into the White House with him recognize that actually to get a deal, they might have to ratchet up the support for Ukraine. They might have to ratchet up the sanctions, as I talked about in the last answer, do some more things on sanctions to really hurt Russia, to force Putin to the table.
From your perspective, what kind of leverage Donald Trump has over Russia in terms of Ukraine? And do you feel that he would be ready to use all tools which are on his table, which would be on his table in the White House?
I think he comes in with a lot of leverage to begin with, because I think Putin really wants some decisions from Trump that will be positive for Russia. He very much wants that sanctions relief. He also would like to see Trump ease off the weapons support to Ukraine. So he's going to try to appease President Trump. But if that leverage that Trump has doesn't work, President Trump is either going to have to increase the leverage or he's going to have to compromise. And hopefully he's not going to compromise in a way that hurts the long-term security, viability, and sovereignty of Ukraine.
How do you see the possible scenarios after the January 20th regarding Trump and these negotiations between the United States and Russia? And can you imagine a scenario in which Trump meets with Vladimir Putin in the United States, for example?
I can very much imagine a scenario where President Trump meets with Putin. Remember, he met with Putin, I think, 3 times, one-on-one, during his first presidency. And a couple of those meetings had a significant time where they were together just in private with 1 or 2 translators, no aides. And so that was how they formed this better relationship, supposedly, according to each of them. But whether President Trump is able to accomplish anything from those one-on-one meetings remains to be seen. Putin is a very cagey person. He's not always honest, even with people he considers friends, even when he can be easily shown to be not telling the truth. He also breaks deals all the time. So this is going to be a complicated, difficult negotiation between Trump and Putin. But I do think that they will meet in person. I'm not sure, though, that they will meet in person in the United States. I think Putin would be worried about going to the United States, as he is worried about going to any Western country around the world. Remember, he's indicted by the ICC. Now, the United States is not a member of the ICC convention, but the United States could choose to arrest him. I don't think that that would happen under President Trump, at least not initially. But I think there's too many dangers and too many questions around a visit by Putin to the United States. I don't think he would do it. Remember, he's not traveling very much. I think he's been to Belarus, he's been to China, he's been to a couple other places, but he's very worried about travel because he carries with him that baggage of being indicted by the ICC, accused as a war criminal, and believed to be a war criminal by people around the world, including especially in Europe.
Can Donald Trump be played by Vladimir Putin during one-on-one meetings, from your perspective?
Well, I would certainly hope not. And remember, President Trump, he may do some of those meetings one-on-one, but he has his advisors to prep him and prepare him and to bounce ideas off with, to report back on what he heard from Putin. I don't know what will happen in those discussions. I want to be optimistic. I want to take our incoming president at face value, that he does intend to find a compromise that's going to be good for both countries and be good for the world. But I do think anyone going into a negotiation with a former KGB officer, someone who's used to getting his way, someone who uses violence and uses corruption to get his way when he doesn't get it immediately, should be very wary of any discussions with Putin, should be question anything that he says, should look for backup for anything he says, and look for assurances that he's going to do what he says.
Also, there are lots of discussions regarding Kit Kellogg's plan on the war, on ending the war in Ukraine by creating a demilitarized zone across these front lines, by also imposing a ceasefire and enforcing this ceasefire with the European peacekeeping forces. What is your take on such plan, and do you believe that Kremlin can agree with such conditions?
I think this plan would be a good one if it could actually be implemented. I'm just not sure if it can be implemented for 2 reasons. First, I'm not sure where you would get these peacekeeping troops for. I don't see European countries, volunteering to send their young men and women into harm's way on the border with Russia, which again cannot be trusted, which is engaged in war crimes inside Ukraine and could easily engage in violence against peacekeeping troops. I also question whether Russia would actually observe any ceasefire, whether they would actually just break the ceasefire very early on after the ceasefire were entered into. And so these are some of the reasons why I'm not sure this plan will work, but in theory, it's a good one.
Is there a potential for a confrontation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in case if Putin declines, like the best case Trump's offer on Ukraine?
You know, he hasn't said much, President Trump, to suggest that he wants to, engage in any sort of confrontation militarily between the United States and Russia, but he is also unpredictable. And so if he ends up being very disappointed by Putin, if he feels like Putin has lied to him or has harmed him or harmed his presidency, you could imagine that's possible. But we haven't heard any communications from President Trump or his advisors to suggest that they are leaning that way.
Let's cover also North Korean involvement in the war in Ukraine. According to President Zelensky, 3,800 North Koreans have already been killed or wounded in the war against Ukraine. Why did Biden's administration fail to deter deployment of North Korean troops to Ukraine and Russia?
Well, this is an astounding development. It happened very quickly. We heard that, 10,000 or more North Korean troops had showed up in Russia, that they were being sent to the front line in the Kursk region, and now many have been killed and slaughtered. And there are reports that suggest that Russia hasn't been careful about protecting the lives of these North Korean soldiers. And I'd also note that these North Korean soldiers are not battle tested. Many of them are probably not well trained. We don't know about the interoperability between North Korean troops and Russian troops. I think there are big questions there about whether they are even working together well. They've basically been slaughtered. And Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, probably doesn't care, because he doesn't care much about the welfare of his people. His country is destitute. It's impoverished. There's a political oppression in North Korea. So perhaps there aren't many repercussions for a dictator like Kim Jong-un when he sends his people to be killed for no reason, for no valid reason in Russia. But I think it's a concern because it shows that some countries, rogue states like North Korea, are willing to support Russia no matter what, that they want that alliance so badly. They're willing to sacrifice the lives of so many young people from their country. Hopefully that's not going to happen with more of the other countries that are friendly with Russia. But I would note, Russia doesn't have that many friends in the world. You're talking about North Korea, Belarus, Iran, used to be Syria. That's not their friend anymore. They're being kicked out of Syria. Just a few countries that actually support Russia no matter what. Let's hope that alliance does not grow. And that's one of the things that the incoming president and NATO have an obligation to prevent, is to prevent there from being stronger alliances for Russia so it can rely on more countries as it continues this illegal war here in Ukraine.